Good afternoon, everyone. I would request the speakers to please turn on their video. Although you can stay on mute for a few more minutes till the introductions are completed. Okay, so once again, good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to the webinar of today, which will be led by industry experts, subject matter experts on challenging dynamics of talent management in unprecedented times. So I welcome all our attendees who have joined us on YouTube. A note to the attendees, we will be conducting a Q&A session towards the end of today's panel discussion. So you can send in your questions using the chat box on YouTube, and on your behalf, I will direct those questions to our speakers. If you wish, you could also send in your questions on our email, either to Mr. Vivek Shastri or to me. And like I mentioned, I'll ask your questions to the speakers. Another point for the viewers who've joined us, please subscribe to the Creating Values channel, YouTube channel. It would help you in receiving notifications about our upcoming webinars and any other events that we are conducting. And to our speakers, well, it might be confusing what webinars are. So they are quarantine webinars. Although I hope none of our speakers and none of the attendees who joined us are currently quarantined. We hope not. So with that note, let's start with today's, webinar. Just give me a second until my screen. Yes. So a brief introduction about Creating Values. We are Creating Values, an ISO certified management consulting firm, and we provide strategic advisory services across across industries to various organizations. The four main domains in which we provide our consulting services are people and culture, which is our HR advisory arm, technology and risk is our IT consulting arm, business strategy consulting, and brand strategy consulting. We have also initiated executive search services and have already been empaneled with several companies and are helping companies in getting right kind of talent for their key strategic as well as senior management roles. So if you have any queries about the kind of advisory services, consulting services that we are providing, please get in touch with us and we will be happy to walk you through our corporate profile about the kind of services that we are offering, our a bouquet of offerings. Well, I would request our attendees to make a note of our upcoming webinar, which is scheduled for 26th of June at 4 p.m. And the topic is Pandemic or Not, Securing Employees' Mental Well-being. These current times have actually not just brought to forefront the physical well-being of employees, the importance of it, but also the importance of mental well-being, the mental health aspect of all the employees. It's not just the pandemic, but certain recent events that have come to forefront have also brought in the importance of actually addressing and resolving issues of anxiety, acknowledging that yes, there are people who fight depression, and how can we as an organization, as HR leaders, come forward and help them. So with that in mind, we would have our speakers talk about the kind of practices that they have already implemented or plan to implement within their organization to secure the mental well-being of their employees. So please register for it. It will be on 26th of June, that is next Friday at 4 p.m. So with that, I will start with a brief introduction first. So I welcome our esteemed speakers. Today's panel discussion is focused around how talent management practices shall adapt to current times and what are some key features to consider in the near future. The session is formatted as a panel discussion. I have the privilege to moderate this session with distinguished panel members. We have with us Dr. Siraj Rahman. He is the Director, Institute of HRD. He was the Regional Vice President South, Indian Society for Training and Development during 2001-2002. He has undergone a certification program in StyleView and CareerView online assessment systems of Decision Dynamics from USA. He has published books in human resources management, which include talent management, strategic HRM, performance management, etc. He has been awarded with Udyog Mitra Award by Institute of Economic Studies, New Delhi. Our next speaker is Mr. Anshul Dureja, MD and CEO of Creating Values. Including his entrepreneurial journey, he has over 25 years of professional experience. He started out as a technocrat, then his role diversified, and he was leading 6 roles in his previous corporate avatar. He was also the chief people officer, managing over 6,000 employees globally for the company. He started creating values with the aim to enable the enablers, that is the business, IT, and HR leaders. He's a sought after speaker at multiple forums. He's an author in making and a happiness coach. So, today's panel, like I mentioned, today's discussion is formatted as a panel discussion. So I will be directing some focused questions to our speakers. So the first question I would first direct to Dr. Siraj. So I would request him to unmute himself. So Dr. Siraj, the current times have challenged or rather drastically modified the ways companies treat their human capital related strategies. What are the major shifts that you have witnessed?
Thank you, Sujata. It's a very relevant question in today's time. We are all, witnessing this situation, and situation is becoming more and more tense and volatile these days. I visualize that there are two kinds of uncertainties. One is there is uncertainty on the sides of the organizations. Organizations are facing a lot of uncertainty. They don't know what's going to happen to businesses. So most of the economic indicators, whether from the country's economy side or from the global side, they're all painting a negative picture. So this is one of the major, dimensions of today's business environment. The second dimension is even among the employees, there is a lot of uncertainty or anxiousness because some big organizations have downsized their organizations. They're asking their employees to go. So this has created a fear. So this is the environment in which we are operating today. Now the question is, how do we deal with this environment? So I feel that there are a few thrust areas which all HR people should focus on. The first area is reinstilling confidence. As employees are tense, as employees are becoming more and more anxious about the future, whether they are going to have their job or not. So the HR people who are the HR leaders in the organizations, they need to focus on building up their confidence level. They need to instill confidence level. They need to create a feeling that yes, we are together, we will overcome. So this kind of feeling has to be developed by the HR. And HR people are specialized in that kind of an activity. The second focus is on the organization side. As the organizations are also facing a lot of uncertainty, organizations need to focus on stabilizing their businesses at the earliest. With the help of people, they need to ensure that their sales force, their marketing team, they get into action and they, as quickly as possible, they stabilize the business. And another important focus area, which most of the organizations have realized during this COVID times, is the use of technology. So imagine organizations who are unable to use the technology. So COVID has forced them to use the technology. So going forward, in order to manage most of the HR operations or even the general business operations, organizations need to fully leverage the technology. So I feel that these are the three focus areas considering the environment in which we are operating today.
Okay, very nicely put, Dr. Siraj, and quite concisely as well. So, Mr. Anshul, I would direct the same question to you that in current times, the human capital related strategies are drastically modified. And so, what are the major shifts that you have witnessed?
Thank you, Sujata, for having me over here. Thanks once again to Dr. Siraj for being over here. It is really nice to be a co-speaker on this panel again with him. And thank you for the wonderful audience as they have been supporting us as always. I think the question is, as Dr. Siraj said, it's a very important question, and because in these times there's a lot of changes we are seeing in terms of human capital related perspectives. There are some drastic changes and there are some different changes. For sure, I would say that's a mix of things which are happening. But the bottom line is that we cannot have a template which would one size fits all. So every organization has to derive their own working methodologies for their own human talent. It cannot be a manufacturing company of a one scale could deploy the same set of a template for a services company of another scale. So you really need to reinvent for your own organization. I think some of the common pieces which we have been able to see is probably realign the policy, mainly the work from home. I think that is something which has changed because we never saw WFH as the way we saw in the last 3 months. So I think these times also have given a lot of time and I would say focus to organizations and an opportunity to organizations to look inward and it's a grease in the oil sort of a piece. So they have greased themselves for future excellence to come. There have been also, I would say, some good stuff, which is in terms of if we see the volume of the e-learnings, that has really improved a lot. And that has been exponential. In our webinars, and I'm sure, Sujata, you have been moderating most of the sessions, and you would be privy that a lot of CHROs have said that thousands of number of hours or thousands of e-learning hours have been spent in by the employees, which were initially not because there was a resistance. Physical learning is far more important and relevant than online learning. So these are some of the trends. Some of the other trends I think we have seen is in terms of the PMS. Some organizations have really gone ahead in terms of doing that, which is really good. Some are doing it currently. But these are the pieces which probably have been happening. But I think there is something which I would suggest probably which the organization really also need to do more, which I am saying are not happening so evidently. I think COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerabilities of organizations to a level which they never thought about. So we never had a de-risking plan of the scale which COVID is now testing it out. Where are we on the succession planning from a HR perspective? Not many organizations have effective succession planning programs in place. So God forbid something happens to the top level or to the critical roles. What is the readiness? So in India, you would have a far lesser, I would say, single-digit organizations who would have a very effective SP framework. Now that's a huge potential and an opportunity for organizations to really get the ball rolling in terms of these. So these could be human-related strategies I'm talking about. Succession planning could be one. The second could be in terms of probably let me take a cue from the e-learning I was talking about and the thousands of hours. But the challenge is that even Dr. Siraj, who is a much more expert and experienced person than me in talent management, would agree that blindly doing a e-learning doesn't make any sense if it doesn't get really, I would say, mapped to your talent management strategy. So somewhere down the line, I think that strategy has to be in place. So only then you would be not only have a good effective L&D program or a talent management program, but you would also be able to have some ROI out of it. And then there would be some other, I would say, low brownie points or low hanging fruits, which we may expect in terms of human capital strategies, like organizations can really focus in terms of digital HR. So it's about digital as a business, but digital as a HR. Also transforming your culture, not only HR should not see itself as a custodian of HR, but should also be seen something as a entity which is fostering the digital culture. I think that is very important. We have seen that there's a lot of organizations have either laid off or probably cut down on the salary cuts, effective salary cuts. So this is the right time probably for some strategies on HR in terms of total rewards. So we have to see that transformation, and probably we would be seeing the times to come into the industry wherein the HR is now moving from a R&R to a total reward sort of a scenarios. And then there would be a couple of other 2-3 pieces I can talk about in terms of change management, HR branding, and stuff. So, but those are regular. I think these are the 3-4 which I just wanted to share.
Thank you, Anshul. In fact, rightly said, well, work from home, digitization, these are some of the things that have been, spoken very frequently, especially when the pandemic has hit us and hit us really hard. But apart from that, what you mentioned is critical, that digitization should not just stop right, by just enabling your employees to work from home. Rather, it has to go beyond. Build a digital culture, have a digital strategy roadmap for your HR function as well. So that is a very crucial note that you've made. And some of the things that normally organizations tend to overlook or sometimes do not understand the importance of is things like having total rewards framework, relooking at their rewards and recognition framework, and succession plan. So thank you so much, Mr. Anshul, for sharing those points with us. I would move to the next question, and I would direct that question to Mr. Anshul again. Many companies struggle with regards to the ROI, the return on investment of the L&D program. So how can effectiveness of trainings be achieved?
Uh, it's a pretty tricky piece, but yes, I don't think it's a very complex. Also, it's something which is very simple. But I would again try to map it with what I said initially, that there's a lot of learnings happening. So learnings is happening is good, but how much those learnings are getting transformed into the real world scenario or the output achievement, I think that is the ROI impact of it. Uh, Unfortunately, the learnings, as I said initially, have to be mapped to your talent management strategies. We need to ask ourselves whether everyone needs every training or no. I think that is the crux of it. So if you don't have a strategy and effective execution, you will never get a ROI. To me, calculating ROI is simple, very simple. Honestly, it's not a very it's not so difficult as it's put out to be. But if you have the right strategy in place, you could definitely get it. I generally use 4-step approach in terms of calculating ROI. First is for any effective talent management strategy, you need to have a baseline. So now, where would you have a baseline starting from? So the baseline is your assessment center. So you need to have a fantastic assessment center conducted on your role-based competencies, not on any other, but a role-based competencies. Try to figure out your individual gaps through those assessment centers. So that form part of your baseline surveys. Post that, run your developmental centers. In the developmental centers, align your trainings or your developmental or your exposure piece. Try to implement 70-20-10 methodology in those, and then have a systematic 1 year of or 2 year of a mini assessment redone again, so that you see that how the gaps have been able to identify. Any tangible enhancement in the role achievements is your ROI. And that's why uh, I suggest always to have your baseline as very strong, and that should be based on your role-based competencies and then the assessment centers, and then you would be able to easily achieve the ROI. That is my thought.
Thank you, Mr. Anshul. So just on a side note, not about talent management practices, but on a side note to both of our speakers, I have pets at home. So if they suddenly start, barking uncontrollably, please do not be alarmed. And that certainly is not the entertainment for today. I will, if that happens, I'll just, go on mute for a few seconds until they calm down. So just as a side note to the speakers. So moving to the next question, which I'll direct to Dr. Siraj. As it is clear, it's been mentioned by Mr. Anshul a couple of times, even touched upon by you, that one size fits all cannot be applicable for L&D programs. So the question arises to assess based on what? Please elaborate on the right way to base the assessments on.
The assessment is a very important area for development. So without assessment, there cannot be any development. It is only through the assessment we identify what are the gaps. Okay, and for this purpose, one framework which is going to help the organizations is the competency framework. So organizations need to have a competency framework. Every job needs to have a competency framework, because in the light of those competency framework, if you analyze and assess someone's performance, you can see the gap. So what is the desired level? What is the current level? So this gap analysis is what is going to help us in designing the training program effectively. And let's say you rolled out a program, and after that you want to measure effectiveness. Earlier we were talking about measuring effectiveness. So if you don't have a competency framework, if you are not identifying the gap, what are you going to measure? Or how are you going to assess the effectiveness? So therefore, it's the competency framework or the competency gap analysis which will help us in first assessing the gap and then also bridging the gap. So therefore, if any meaningful competency development or talent development system should be integrated with some kind of assessment. So there are a lot of assessments which are available. Either we can run a full-fledged assessment center, or we can start with few general activities, let's say interview, a presentation, some simple activities can be initiated so that our assessment becomes more effective.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Siraj. In fact, rightly said, as both Dr. Siraj and Mr. Anshul have mentioned, that you have to base your L&D programs, your efforts, your interventions on on thorough assessment. And what do you assess on? You should assess based on competencies. Have a clear cut identification about which are the competencies, what is my desired level, my organization's desired level for a certain role, and then what is the current the proficiency level that that individual is exhibiting. And yes, gone are the days of just having one traditional interview, because the effectiveness of those, or the accuracy of very traditional age old methodologies and a single methodology, is far low as compared to running scientifically designed, comprehensive, holistic assessment centers that have, that use multiple toolkits to assess employees. So that is the note that I think L&D professionals and business leaders and HR leaders who've joined us today should make a note of and go back and implement within your organizations. So with that, I would direct my next question to both the speakers one by one, starting with Mr. Anshul. Why is it that many Indian companies don't embrace competency frameworks, in your view? Anshul, you're on mute. Yes.
Yes. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
I would like Dr. Siraj to go for this first. if it's
So, Dr. Siraj.
I feel that organizations are not practicing competencies or competency framework because there is no awareness. Some of the organizations are still in that old mindset, old era. Okay, they are not yet looked at the challenges of the strategic era where a different kind of mindset is required. So since they are continuously having that traditional mindset, they are unable to look at the HR function as a strategic business partner. So today HR has become a strategic business partner. A CEO demands accountability from a HR professional. Okay, and if you have to produce results, if you have to demonstrate your role as a HR strategic business partner, then you need to have a competency framework. See, competency framework is not some kind of a HR fad or some kind of a fashion. It's all a performance-oriented framework. It's all about performance. You're identifying how you can enhance the performance of people, how you can build the performance of people, how you can take the performance of your entire organization to the next level. So if organizations are unable to understand performance, then they will not be able to understand the role of competency. So competency mapping, competency framework is all about the performance and performance enhancement of the entire organization. And the organizations which are in the strategic era, which are considering the HR function as a strategic function, they have realized this, and hence they are, having a deeper commitment toward building competencies, nurturing competencies in the organization. So what is required is the shift in that mindset from the traditional era to the strategic era mindset. I think we need to make that paradigm shift.
In fact, wisely said, a shift from a shift to the strategic era from the traditional era. So thank you for that, Dr. Siraj. So Mr. Anshul, organizations don't adopt because of awareness, lack of awareness. Now, what are your views apart from
that? I would have three answers to it based on what all I have learned and probably based on my interactions around the industry, and of course, some of them with Dr. Siraj himself. A Bible or a Bible on himself on all these pieces. I would say there are three broad pieces. One is awareness, second is misconceptions, and the third is the choices, being spoiled for choices. And I would try to explain one by one. Dr. Siraj is bang on that there is very low awareness. So when I was the president and the chief people officer for a company 6 years back, anybody used to come to me and I would say, it's a GAM, so don't give me a competency-based GAM. And the fun element was that who all came to me, they never tried beyond a point to explain me that why it is not a GAM. So I think awareness is one. In terms of awareness also, I think we ourselves get restricted because we are too much at times between our own bandwidths that we don't have some loose bandwidth to learn new things. I think that is also a concern area. But yes, Dr. Siraj is right. The way the traditionally things have happened, that's the way it's been getting done. The second is in terms of the misconception. I think more than the awareness, the misconception is hitting us more in India rather than the misconceptions themselves, rather than the awareness itself. And those misconceptions are, am I at the stage where I should go for competency? The state and the size, the scale, these all pieces, when the organization keep on thinking, I'm just a 100 company, 100 crore company. I am just a 100 employee company. I've seen even 2000 crore company asking me, Anshul, do I really need? Am I at that scale? So I would say these are some of the misconceptions which are hugely, I would say, I would say they are on the bedrock of these misawareness that what's in it for me. I think nobody asked this question, what's in it for me, but everybody is ready to say, okay, probably am I ready as an organization to embrace this? The reality is, yes, the sooner you start, the better it would be. The sooner you start, the more beneficial it would be. The third element why in India it's lack, I think it's the spoiled for choices. And spoiled for choices is because since we have less amount of awareness all across, and there are too many, I would say, avenues which are now coming up, emerging in the last 2-3 years of online assessment centers. So get yourself assessed. Now, we need to understand, and as I shared, and Dr. Siraj was also mentioning, for the best of the results for you to get out of talent management, your baseline of assessment center should be very, very thorough and should be role-based. So you cannot have a behavioral based assessment to carve out that how this person is going to behave after this assessment or a development center. So the point I'm trying to say is, in any online assessment center, you would have some generic pieces which are nowhere, probably some part of it would be related, but not entirely it would be related to the role which you are doing. So you might have a online assessment center which is true, which is common for a supply chain person, as common for a finance person, as common for a HR person. But the underlying role derivatives expected are very different. So I would say, how do you choose? That spoiled for choices also is a huge paradox in India. And probably, I think, as I move ahead in some of other questions which you may ask, I would deliberate it. But anything, Dr. Siraj, you want to add on to what I said?
I think you have covered most of the important aspects related to that. So basically, organizations, as you mentioned, require more awareness. They need to understand how this entire process adds value to the organization. It's all about adding value to the organization.
Yes.
And every organization desires that, and that's the goal of the CEO. So here, HR is helping the CEO or the organization to add more and more value. So that's why I think more and more awareness has to be created in the organization, in the industry.
Yes.
Over to you, Sujata.
Yes. So thank you, Dr. Siraj, and thank you, Mr. Anshul. In fact, Mr. Anshul, from whatever you said, yes, all of those points are valid, certainly valid. However, my takeaway from what you said is, that when you were approached, even you had kind of, asked the person to go away with that it's just gyan. But the point is here that the HR leaders have to take an ownership on themselves and follow the mantra of either, convince or get convinced, the way we follow at Creating Values, and the way you've always encouraged us, that either convince me or you get convinced by me. So that is what everyone who's trying to take a kind of a strategic initiative implemented within the organization, they have to understand that the path of convincing will not be easy. However, even though that's just the first step, but please be prepared whenever you approach. Do your study, understand the importance of competency frameworks, understand the importance of assessment and development centers, understand the right way of doing it, have statistics to support you. Like I mentioned earlier, if you get a good holistic customized assessment center conducted using multiple toolkits, then your accuracy of assessments goes up to 70 to 80%, which is a huge number when compared to a single interview format. So, and also understand that there are various areas within an employee life cycle wherein the assessment and development centers can help you. They are not just only for the hiring stage, but they are at various other stages. So these are some of the things that can help L&D professionals and the HR leaders to, fight it out internally and get final approvals to implement competency framework and have assessment and development centers within their organizations. So with that, I will move to my next question, and I would direct it to Dr. Siraj. Dr. Siraj, some companies have adopted generic competencies, behavioral or organizational, while others go for role-based competency framework. So which format is best suited in your opinion?
See, organizations which do not have any competency framework, if they want to just understand whether it will help or not, they can start with generic competency model, but that's not a long-term solution. So the long-term solution for every organization is to look at its vision, mission, its strategies, business plan, its culture, and then create a competency model, develop a competency model for the organization. And in developing a competency model, there are three factors which are going to guide us. The first factor is the size of the organization. What is the size of the organization? Is it a small organization, medium organization, or large organization? If you take a small organization, even role-based competency model can be created because number of unique roles are limited. But if the organization is very, very large, so many, hundreds of different unique roles are there, different functions are there. So in large organizations, a functional competency model could be better. So this is one factor, that is the size. The second is the structure of the organization. How is it structured? Is your organization structure simple? Is your organization complicated? Is your organization and global organization with so many subsidiaries? So the size also makes a difference. And the third factor is decide, which helps us in selecting a model, is the scope. What is your scope? When you are developing a competency framework, what is the scope? What is the scope which you have? For example, some organizations say we want to create competency model only for a critical function. So I remember an organization where we did some work. It was a steel manufacturing organization. So there the CFO was very enlightened. He said we require a competency model only for our function. He was worried about his function. He wanted to add more value to his function. He said do it only for the finance function. So similarly, some organizations take up sales function and do it. In some organization, HR function is selected. So again, it all depends upon the size and the structure of the organization. Another important aspect is some organizations don't want to do it for the entire organization. What they do is they just select the leadership team and they realize that the leadership team's role is very, very critical and they want to have a competency framework. So their scope becomes very, very limited to only the leadership level, leadership development. So therefore, selection of any competency model when we are creating, it depends upon three factors: the size of the organization and the structure of the organization and the scope which we have in our mind when we are creating this competency framework.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Siraj. So basically, first of all, have a clear-cut idea about what you want to do and why you want to do it. What is the objective behind having a competency framework, and accordingly choose. However, it's been seen typically that role-based competencies help you in the longer run. And that is what you want an organization wants to achieve going forward. So that's a good way to go ahead. However, I've also seen several organizations adopt what Dr. Siraj has just said is the pilot way of going for it. Many times you do not get an approval for going for an organization-wide intervention. So this is one of the key tips or tricks that HR professionals can utilize is go for a pilot project, identify a key function, identify your key roles and then go for it so that you can actually reap the benefits of it and have a case study internally so that you can convince the leadership to opt for a more spread out competency framework for the entire organization, role by role, function by function, as it may be suitable. So with that, I will move to the next question, and I'll direct that question one by one to both the speakers. So now let's talk about developing the right way, just as we've been talking about assessing the right way. So kindly advise about the natural steps which should follow assessment centers. So Mr. Anshul, if you could start with it.
Okay, Sujata, I think development is a very important stage after doing the assessment center. We already have established, both me and Dr. Siraj, that the base of the assessment centers is a good competency framework, and it's an organizational choice. The better, of course, is a role-based, but as Dr. Siraj said, it's dependent on your choice, it's dependent on multiple factors, or the size and the scale of the organization is an important aspect. Similarly, just like the assessment center have a base of a competency framework, the development center has a base of assessment centers, and also the ITPs which are being created after the assessment center. So in the ITPs, I think first of all, there should be a good amount of customization which should be there. All competencies should be mentioned. Strengthening the strengths also should be a key focus area about within the IDPs, and not only improving the gaps also. And then there are a lot of other pieces during the development center which could be done. So you should ideally have the development center, which is based on a 70-20-10, something which we call in the HR space as experience, exposure, and education. If you are trying to have a 70-20-10 model within that, I think that's the best model you could have. Based on that, what you can do is you can have some milestones to track the progress of the individuals from their IDP and till now in the assessment center till now. And then after a year or so, you should do a mini assessment, and at the end of 2 years, you should repeat the assessment center to see what all has been the real impact. I think these are some of the pieces how you could make the best out of your assessment centers and your development centers.
So thank you, Mr. Anshul, for it. So Dr. Siraj, about the same question to you. What follows assessment centers? Your views, your guidelines around the same.
See, one of the prerequisites for assessment centers is the competency framework. Organizations which do not have a competency framework, they cannot think of going ahead with assessment center. Okay, so the first prerequisite is having a competency framework. So assume that the competency framework is there. Now we need to design an assessment center. How do we design? There are a lot of organizations which are into the virtual world. They promise that all competencies can be assessed. So I had a discussion with some of them. So they were unable to, tell us how our competencies. Let's say you select a few competencies and ask them how will you assess. So they failed to demonstrate how their tool assesses all the competencies. So the generic models, generic competency tools which are available, they measure what they have decided to measure. They will not measure what you want. So therefore, once you identify what competencies are required, for each competency you have to identify what is the best method of assessment. Okay, what is the cost-effective method of assessment? So this should be the criteria where you have several methods which can be selected for assessment. So look at which are the cost-effective methods, which are the methods which accurately reflect the job challenges, job complexity. This should be the criteria. And once we design an assessment center, the next important challenge which we ignore most of the time is training of the assessor. Let's say you have designed a grand assessment center, but the assessors are not trained. What will they do? How will they assess objectively? So therefore, before we conduct the assessment center, we need to train the assessors. We need to train the assessors in three things. One is skills. What are the skills required for assessors? Like they require communication skills, they require assessment skills, they require rapport building skills. So they require a lot of, they require conflict resolution skills. So this is one of the topics which we need to cover in the assessors training. Okay, whatever skills are required for conducting the assessment center, they need to possess that. Secondly, they should also have the skills in the, preparing assessment report. Once the assessment is over, you have to prepare a comprehensive report about what did you assess, what are the parameters, what were your observations, what are your recommendations. So they need to have all those things. And thirdly, assessors should also have a deeper understanding of the competency, because they are going to assess competencies. If they don't know what is a competency, what is the meaning of a competency, why these different levels have been created, what are the behavioral indicators at each of the level. If they lack knowledge about all these things, their assessment can become inaccurate. So therefore, my suggestion is, before designing an assessment center, we need to ensure that competency framework is done. And then when we are designing, we need to ensure that the activities which are selected for assessment, they reflect the complexity and the challenge involved in the job. And then we need to thoroughly assess, train the assessors. And once this is done, we can go ahead with the assessment center. And then you get a report, and based on the report, as Anshul mentioned, we can prepare IDPs, we can have a coaching session, we can come out with a number of developmental activities. So this is the sequence which you need to follow.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Siraj. So if I can summarize correctly by what both the speakers have said, yes, first have your competency framework in place, build your, and when I say competency framework, it's not just identifying, but having a detailed dictionary wherein you mention the proficiency level of every competency that you've identified for the role. What is the desired level of proficiency level for a specific role that your organization, would want that employee to have or possess. So have that in place. That is, document that correctly. Then design your assessment centers holistically. Train the assessors who would be conducting, those assessment centers, so that they can, objectively, mark the individuals whom they are assessing. Also, it's what he said is right. Rapport building is very important for assessors, because already, the moment you tell employees that they'll be assessed, that their anxiety levels get heightened. So how can assessors counter that? How can they make the assessees feel a little more comfortable while they are undergoing that kind of an assessment? So that's also important. And then based on the assessment center results, develop IDPs, develop the activities which you want the development centers to be conducted on. In your IDPs, make it on 70-20-10 model, so that your education, exposure, experience, everything gets catered to during the execution of the IDPs. So these, I hope I've been able to summarize a little of what both the speakers were saying. If not, I would still move on to my next question, and then maybe the speakers can barge in later. So, Mr. Anshul, I would direct this question to you. Companies are cutting costs and talent management interventions take the biggest hit. So what is the way forward?
This is a very interesting question in these times, I would say. Everybody's cutting cost. In fact, there is financial pressure on the financials of every company. These are tough times. Nobody had predicted it. Nobody had budgeted for this, as one of my good friends said to me. But I think there are two ways to look at it. I think first is on the work and the project itself. We should not have any knee-jerk reactions of cutting down. One of our my very good friends, he is a CHRO of a firm, and he said, Anshul, my firm has cut down my entire HR and OD. They asked me what expenses you can cut, because we are having close to 1.5 months of a sales loss. So which which cost you are going to cut down from your HR spend? So he said, okay, my HR and OD spend is out. My OD spend is out. TM and OD, sorry. So they said, okay. So he made it 0, and that was a big number. He made it 0 to support it. Last week I was speaking to him, and he told me that our May sales, the month of May, the sales in that month was the highest across the last 3 years in May. Now he is fighting back with his management to restore, or at least to partially start now getting some budget for these pieces. So I would say, yes, lockdowns were tough, but slowly world is coming back. I think costs should be cut, no doubts on that. We should also have always have must-haves, and not, I would say, focus too much on nice-to-haves. But we also need to realize the importance of some of the activities which have to be done. So just like in talent management, it's not about the e-learning which is available. It is also a lot of physical learning. But more importantly, we are still filling the gap for 10%. There is a 70 and a 20 which still needs to be happen. So do you have ample strategies? So you need to cut down cost where it is required, but you also need to realize the importance of the strategic imprints of your cutting down cost. I think that is one. The second is, I think, so this was the first element I wanted to say. The second element is, I think, if organizations are aware that they don't have budgets, even the service providers and the consultants are also aware that the customers don't have budgets. So it is not, I would say, something which is out of a blue moon that the customer is going to say, I don't have money, and the service provider or the consultant is going to say, no, I need to have so much of a money. So that's not going to happen. In fact, over the last 1 month, I think we, and Sujata, you know pretty well, we have closed a couple of deals wherein both the customers, they are fresh new customers who came to us. They needed some projects of HR delivery, one of TMS and one of talent management. So with one of them, we had deferred the cost, and with one, we offered a huge discount. So I think it's not about us, it's the industry per se. If you see cutting across, and I'm sure Dr. Siraj also will be doing the same way. So I think the ecosystem has to thrive. You cannot live isolated in an island by saying, okay, I am cutting down cost. You have to have a focus on the ecosystem also. The ecosystem has to flourish. So the big companies have to give business to their supply chain. The supply chain has to take care of their back-end supply chain and their employees. So even if you don't cut a job cut in your organization, but your resultant impact could create job losses for your partner ecosystem. So I think it's all together. And I think relationship is tested when the times are tough. So choose your partners wisely. Don't cut out everything, but yes, stress on must-haves.
Sure.
That is my thought.
Thank you, Mr. Anshul, for that. Well, we'll be soon moving to the question and answer session. So I would request all the attendees to ask some questions, and please make the best use of this opportunity, since we have subject matter experts with us speaking on talent management practices. So please ask questions. We'll be soon, like I mentioned, we'll be soon moving to the question and answer session. Prior to that, I would just remind all of our attendees about our upcoming webinar, which is scheduled for 26th of June at 4 p.m. Pandemic or not, securing employees' mental well-being. We have invited industry leaders and HR leaders to speak about, the importance of mental well-being of their employees and the kind of practices that they are adopting within their organization. So please join us on 26th of June at 4 p.m. for this amazing webinar. And with that, I'll be moving to the question and answer session. But as usual, my laptop sometimes...
Ask the difficult one to Dr. Siraj.
Now that you said it, I think I'll go and ask the difficult one to you, Mr. Anshul. However, sure. Yes. Okay, so one of our attendees is asking this question, and I would request both the speakers to take a few seconds to answer this, not restricting it to one speaker itself. When we talk about online assessments, or we talk about offline assessments, or a hybrid model of assessment, so in your view, which one is better, which one is the most suited? If Dr. Siraj first, you could speak about it, and then Mr. Anshul, if you could add in.
I think it's a very interesting question. This question was answered during the deliberations in the panel discussion. Most of the online assessment, they don't really address your critical needs. Let's say you have come out with a competency model and you show it to any of the outsiders who are selling these online assessment. If they say that, yes, all these competencies can be assessed, then go ahead. But my idea is that, they may not assess. So you need to use a combination of methods. So whatever competencies the external, online assessment assess, take that data from that. But for a lot of other competencies, you have to use your internal method, because the competencies which you have, the assessment depends upon the nature of the industry, nature of business, the roles in the organization, the culture of the organization. Several factors are important which we have to consider. So therefore, we should not rely too much on the online assessment. We should use our own time-tested, proven methods of assessment.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Siraj. So, Mr. Anshul, over to you, the same question. Online versus offline assessment centers.
Versus hybrid.
Versus hybrid.
Yeah. So, I think, as I had stated earlier, and Dr. Siraj also seconded that, I think it's all about, we are spoiled for choices. So, at times we see online is far more easier, because you have to just use a wallet or probably pay online. It would be much more faster. I think speed is the key in an online. Offline is more time consuming. So the test result which you would get in an online would be probably much faster than what you would get in an offline mode. Even when somebody comes to you for doing an offline assessment, he would ask you 10 different questions, because he is more worried about the result. In an online, nobody is going to ask you anything, how good or bad your competencies are, how good or bad what you expect. So I would say, if you don't need any questions, because if you don't want any quality, I think in any way, online is safer. If you're shorter on time, online is safer. But online works well, certainly in scenarios if you are hiring too many people or candidates from, say, fresh from colleges. Hypothetically, because they are coming in fresh, there is nothing, no baggage. They are not having any experience. So I think online works fantastically well. Number two, online works in several verticals. So hypothetically, if you are hiring for inside sales, so most of the times the competencies required for a inside sales across services or manufacturing would be the same. It doesn't matter at all. So from probably verticalization why online is fantastic. But if you are moving into the middle management, certainly for the senior management and for critical operations. So hypothetically, if you are going to have a competency for an investment banker in your company, I don't know how many CHROs in India today would rely on an online assessment. So I think role-based competencies and an offline approach is far more better. Authenticity is much higher.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Anshul and Dr. Siraj. Yes, rightly said. So when it comes to assessing key people and assessing key roles, then offline assessments is the way forward, because you do have a human angle wherein, though you have certified assessors who are there, first of all, to not just design the assessments, but also to conduct it. And then they are the ones who are worried about the final reports and the results that they have to submit to the client. So they would ensure that they do a thorough job at assessing while the assessment center is being conducted. So thank you so much for that. And in fact, there are so many ways in which offline assessments also help us, from the perspective that, you could shuffle your assessors in between different assessment tests that are happening, so that, even the assessor bias that might come in can get curbed, something that even we have done in the past. So even that helps. Having multiple assessment toolkits for even to judge a single competency helps, so that, any kind of ambiguity gets completely washed out. So thank you for sharing your views on that. One question which is asked and has been directed to Mr. Anshul. So, fine, competency frameworks, both the speakers have been talking about it, but that individual asks that where can these competency frameworks, be percolated within the organization? Are they used only for assessments, only for trainings, or there are other areas wherein these can be percolated?
Oh yeah, well, for certain there are a number of them. Top of the mind recall, I would share some, and then probably Dr. Siraj can add. I think it's an entry to exit strategy. So during hiring, I think you could create a lot of questionnaires. You could conduct BEIs at the time of your hiring. You can also conduct assessment centers. So using these competencies. So hiring is one effective way. Then second is in terms of your learning and talent management, as we have spoken throughout the panel. The third could be in terms of identifying your top talent. So a lot of organizations only bank on identifying their hypos as the last 3 years PMS achievers. I think that is not good. I think it should be a weighted approach, wherein you are taking some percentage of a PMS results and some percentage of a assessment center result, which are based on competencies. Then certainly your employee the rewards and recognition should also be based on that. There are multiple ways. I think these were some of the top of the mind recall.
Sure. Thank you, Anshul. In fact, I remember being asked this question so many times when we've approached clients. And then, when we've got into discussion, they've realized that succession planning is another area. Yeah. Promotions are the areas wherein they should be banking on assessment centers rather than only the PMS results. Yes. Because some organizations, they also cry about fairness, transparency. So why not use assessment centers? That brings in fairness, that brings in transparency, that brings in objectivity. And so many benefits are there when it comes to having a proper streamlined competency-based assessment center and development centers. So thank you for that. So Dr. Siraj, one of our attendees is asking, is it true that assessment centers focus more on personality characteristics and behavior and are not focused enough about when it comes to technical or practical skills?
When we say competency, it includes 3 important dimensions. One is knowledge, second one is the skill, and third is the attitude. So assessment center looks at the entire person's personality. It looks at the entire personality. So therefore, attitude, knowledge, skill, all these aspects are, are thoroughly assessed. So when we are identifying competencies, we are not just identifying the behavioral competencies. Behavioral competencies are just 50%. The remaining competencies are even the attitudinal competencies, technical competencies. So we look at both technical plus behavioral. So that's where we get holistic performance from someone. We are not just focusing on one and ignoring other. We are looking at all competencies which are relevant for the job, which are relevant for the position, irrespective of whether they are technical or behavioral. This categorization is done little later, but first we will be identifying the competencies for every job. So there is no question of ignoring technical competencies. When you do an assessment center, even technical competencies are to be assessed, but the methods could be different. So for technical competencies, you may use tests. You may use tests, whereas behavioral competence, you may use behavioral interview, this kind of methods. So ultimately, all competencies are assessed in an assessment center.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Siraj. In fact, that kind of, although, the discussion has been around competency frameworks, it has been around assessment centers and multiple toolkits and everything. Still, one of our attendees has this question. Maybe that is something that is about maybe the level of awareness about what assessment centers are, how they are designed. So the question is that, when we talk about assessment centers, naturally the thing that comes to the mind is that employees are being assessed. So assessed in the sense, so there'll be tests. So will there be written tests, or are there other formats of assessment tools which can be used?
So there are several methods. Again, it depends upon the competency. Let's say you want to assess a competency called communication. You can use a written test. You can also conduct an interview. You can have an oral presentation. So basically, we have to look at each competency and we have to see what method appropriately assesses that competency, and then we are going to decide the method. So it's a combination of methods which we are going to use depending upon the competency which we are going to assess.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Siraj. So there are several, assessment methodologies. It's not just a written test that employees or assessees have to give. There are interviews, different format of interviews known as behavior event interviews, and there are several other toolkits. In fact, even games are used, and they are used quite effectively to assess certain competencies. And I think the beauty of it is that through games, the SSCs never really know what is being assessed, so they can't really, hide their natural way of reacting when a game is being played out. So that's some of the ways of countering the kind of issues that that normally typical assessments, fall prey to. So thank you, Dr. Siraj, for that. Mr. Anshul, one of the questions is for you that, many organizations, they rely on psychometric tests. They always tie up with an organization, and right at the hiring stage, they get psychometric tests done. So then what is the need of doing, a huge assessment center, and why not just a single psychometric test?
Okay, I would say there's too much of a difference between a full comprehensive assessment center and a psychometric test. In fact, a psychometric test could be used as a component or a testing methodology within the assessment center. So in assessment center, you could have more than 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of how much you agree as an organization to get it done with your partner. So you could have psychometrics and non-psychometrics. Some of the pieces Dr. Siraj just mentioned, and Sujata, you also added, games could be there. I think it's all about the level of the accuracy. So every test keeps on adding some level of accuracy of the profile of the personality which is going to come out. Dr. Siraj said very good KSA. So to judge that KSA personality type, it's very important that the accuracy also has to be of your entire instruments of your testing methodology has to be very good. Psychometrics are good, but if you add up a lot of other pieces in the assessment center to do a comprehensive piece, your authenticity would be much more higher. And the credibility of you, your test would be much treated well. So that was a answer on this question. But on the previous question you just asked, Dr. Siraj, I would like to add something with your permission.
Certainly, Anshul, please.
Thank you. So I think one of the other pieces important apart from what you and Dr. Siraj said is in terms of when you conduct the assessment center, you need to have a lot of confidence building measures at the start. I think that is also very, very important. You really need to walk the participants through that what this is and what this is not. I think once you get that, and then the entire, I would say, environment gets much more secure.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Anshul, for that. In fact, this is something that is advisable for organizations that whenever you have any assessment centers or development centers, always communicate clearly with the employees about the intent, the objective of the assessment center, so that they are aware, and that their anxiety levels are not that high that they do not perform that well. And like I mentioned earlier, absolutely right, that the assessors, it is your responsibility that you build a rapport with the assessees, you make them feel comfortable, you set the objective right, so that the assessment center can be conducted smoothly. So Dr. Siraj, another question related to psychometric tests. It is a general belief that, psychometric tests are quite expensive. They are, online. They are very, very technical, very tricky. So any views about which are the kinds of psychometric tests, and are they really always expensive?
I think in the market, all types of psychometric tests are available. There are tests which are cost effective, which are cheaper, and there are tests which are costly also. Again, organizations have to decide what is their budget, and based on that budget, they can select. For example, many of the leadership development psychometric tests, they are slightly costly. If you want to go for MBTI, not only they are costly, you need to undergo certification also. Okay, Hogan assessment, all these are slightly advanced tests and they are very costly. But there are some other simple tests like 16PF is available. These are all relatively, cost effective. And today there are a lot of psychometric tests which are available online. They are, very, very reasonably priced, 500 rupees, 600 rupees. At this rate, you will get the psychometric test. But again, as we have been discussing again and again, we have to first freeze on our competencies. Whatever test we are going to select, see whether it can measure the competencies which you have identified. If it can measure, there is nothing wrong in using that. But the accuracy is not going to be 100%. The accuracy could be between 60 to 80%. We cannot expect 100% accuracy even in psychometric tests.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Siraj. So psychometric tests, yes, certainly they help, but do not expect 100% accuracy. And any which ways, always ask the question that will that psychometric test serve the purpose of you evaluating certain competencies? And do not rely on an individual test, but rather go for a comprehensive, a customized assessment center, which is designed, which could include certain psychometric tests. And like there are cost effective, in fact certain free tests also available, which I'm sure if you partner with a good company, they would be including certain such tests in their in the way they design and conduct the assessment centers as well. So it all depends on choosing the right kind of partner, and in these times choosing partners who can help you with even the kind of payment terms that you're discussing with them. Because yes, Mr. Anshul has rightly said, we are a business community, we are a part of a single ecosystem, and we have to support each other in these unprecedented times. And let's work together. It's not just about what the client organizations wish to achieve, but it is also that the service providers are here to help and assist organizations in the objective that they wish to achieve. So with that, we are closer to a conclusion of today's panel discussion. I first of all would like to thank the attendees who have joined us for our webinar. And in fact, there are so many who've been joining us for the past 2.5 months. So thank you so much for being regular with us. And with that promise, next week again, we'll be joining you on 26th of June at 4 p.m. with Pandemic or Not, Securing Employees' Mental Well-Being, with HR leaders talking about the best practices for mental well-being of their employees. And I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Siraj for joining us today, as well as Mr. Anshul. Thank you for sharing your insights, your observations, your experience, the things that have been happening, and also clarifying some of the doubts that our attendees had. Thank you so much, Dr. Siraj and Mr. Anshul.
Thank you, Dr. Siraj.
It was really great.
Thank you.
Thank you.